What's up guys, it's Coach Cam. Today I want to talk to you about stimulus to fatigue ratio. So here is a picture that I've drawn, and this I believe to be a more accurate representation of the stimulus to fatigue ratio, or the stimulus you get from training and how that actually plays out as you're contracting your muscles up until failure. You'll notice that there's only 100 possible units of stimulation, and that is your muscle being fully maximally stimulated for increases in muscle size, we'll say. So, and after that, you'll notice that it flatlines. Okay, so that's where you're still training, you're incurring more fatigue, but you're not actually getting any more stimulus than possible. You have recruited every single muscle fiber through Henneman-Sized principle as the set continued up to a point of momentary muscular failure. So that's where you want to be, at that 100% mark, and you want to get there with as little fatigue as possible. Now, let's be honest, lifting weights is hard work and is taxing on your body, and there is fatigue and tiredness that builds up from training, whether that's within one set or after several sets of training or over the course of several training sessions. All the fatigue that you accumulate will stack up if it's not properly dealt with, i.e. recovered from, and a proper amount of time has not passed from your last session. So it's important to understand what fatigue is, where it's coming from, right? It's coming from contracting your muscles vigorously against resistance. And we know this, and we know that as you contract up to failure, you get more and more fatigue. Now, what you've probably heard of is the volume camp, right? Dr. Mike Israetel, Jeff Nippard, these guys, and that whole side of the lifting community would say that, well, if you take a set to momentary muscle failure, you're accumulating too much fatigue. And that fatigue is going to impair your ability to train on subsequent sets, right? On your next set. And I just want to point out, I mean, obviously this is assuming you're doing multiple sets with an exercise, right? We can agree this is assuming you're doing 2, 3, 4 sets per exercise. And they're trying to save energy for those later sets. But according to this chart that I drew, you'll see I gave an example here of taking 2 reps in reserve and doing 1 set. And you get a certain amount of stimulus at that point after the set has been completed. Then you're resting, right? These people would have you rest and then go again on the same exact exercise for the same exact muscles, and say you did another set and you left a couple reps in the tank again. Well, you're a little bit more tired now. Your muscles are a little bit more fatigued than they were before, so that metric of stimulus has bumped up. However, you'll also notice that I actually bumped it out a little bit as well. It doesn't actually follow the most the perfect curve of the perfect path toward maximal stimulus. It branches out and gives you more fatigue because you just did several more reps. You just accumulated more fatigue by contracting your muscles all over again. And then they'd say, well, you need to do another set, right, to try to stimulate hypertrophy because you haven't done it yet. So we're going to do a 3rd set, but we're going to leave a couple reps in reserve. Or even if you took the 3rd set to failure, right, then you could bump that dot up even higher, but you're still getting more fatigue. And every set you do, you're setting that fatigue line further and further out. And there's going to come a point where you're too fatigued, right? You've accumulated so much fatigue, now you're inhibiting your body's natural recovery and adaptation process. You know, I shared a video on my Instagram of a guy giving you a bicep workout, and it was bicep curls doing sets of 10, and then you just kept increasing the weight every time you finished 10, and then you got to a certain weight, and then you dropped down and did a drop set back down doing 10 reps each, and that was 300 reps. And he goes, now do that 3 times and your biceps will be sore in 5 days. Well, yeah, you can do too much work. You can overtrain, right? Depends on your definition of overtraining. Do you see overtraining as you can't get up out of bed in the morning and you can't pick up your spoon to eat cereal? Or is overtraining doing any more exercise than what was required to stimulate your body for the adaptations? Which we can all do, right? We can do too much work. We can put in too much training and train for too long, right? Too long of a time period, too many sets, that type of thing. So overall, if you're talking about fatigue, you want to minimize it. How would you go about minimizing it? I'll tell you right now how I would recommend going about minimizing it is instead of planning on doing 2 sets for all of your exercises, plan on doing only 1 set. That will reduce the amount of fatigue that you accumulate. Now, if you train those 1 sets that you do, if you train each of those harder, then you will accumulate more fatigue than you would expect. But we're planning for that, right? So instead of leaving reps in reserve and not getting as much stimulus, right? You're cutting yourself short on the maximal stimulus in that set. And you're saying, well, I have another set to do, so the next set will cover me and will save me and will patch up my way to a full stimulus. Well, what if you didn't have that other set? What if it was most efficient to do it in 1 set? How would you train, right? So you want to keep the muscles under tension. You want to use controlled form so that the muscle stays under tension and so that you can be safer and not get injured. You don't want to be getting injured because then you're not going to be training at all, right? So instead of what they are recommending, I recommend that you try to get your maximum stimulus of a muscle in 1 set, right? That means you fully exhaust the muscle in 1 set. Now, that might trigger your mind to think, well, why don't I do a couple drop sets? That way I really know that I fully fatigue my muscles. Well, if you look at that bar I have at the top that says beyond failure techniques, that's what's happening when you go beyond failure. When you're like, I'm going to take this set to failure, then I'm going to do another one. You're going beyond that, and you're not accumulating any more stimulus, but you are increasing the amount of fatigue your body will then have to recover from before it adapts, right? The stimulus and recovery curve, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it dips down after you train and now you're under recovered. Then you get up to baseline and then you want it to super compensate, right? You want it to go above baseline and then you train again, right? You want that trend to go upward as you're improving and actually adapting to the training. So if you're not doing that, I put a reel on my Instagram again, 3 reasons why you're not progressing. One is you're not training hard enough, right? So on the stimulus line, you're not getting high enough. You're not getting to the top. You're leaving muscle fibers. And those muscle fibers that you're leaving are type 2 muscle fibers. Those are the ones, based on Henneman's size principle, you're going to recruit at the very end. You're going to recruit them when it's the hardest, when you can barely finish that rep. Those last 10 to 20 seconds of a very hard set, that's when you're getting the money reps and the money stimulus on the muscles, because that's when the type 2 fibers are going to come into play. All the rest of it was type 1, type 2A, branching into type 2 muscle fibers, but you want to go to the very end so you get the biggest bang for your buck and you get the most and biggest muscle fibers recruited into the exercise. So you don't want to go beyond failure. You want to go to failure. You don't want to go below failure. You want to go to failure, because if you go below failure, now you have to do another set, right? And that's just like the study that came out that I said I would do this video on about leaving reps in reserve, and that's not even what the study was about. It was about velocity loss, training to a certain velocity loss, training to 30% velocity loss in their movement or 15% velocity loss. Nobody even trains like that anyway. That's very like outer space mindset there. But anyway, they measured a whole bunch of stuff and found that, well, they got pretty much the same results. So your muscles don't know velocity loss. They don't know all those metrics that they use. All they know is tension, and they know fatigue, and they know that they're being recruited as the set continues. So if you're stopping short, which both of these groups in this research study stopped short of failure, one just went closer and one went further from failure, but the group that was further from failure did twice the work. They had to match the volume. So that group ended up doing twice as many sets. Now, I can't say this for sure because I can only see the abstract. I looked for like an hour trying to figure out how I can find the full paper, the full text paper. I just don't have any accounts that I pay for that I'd be able to access that. But they said that the volume was equated, and I read on Instagram that, you know, the volume was equated, which means that they had to match the number of sets. So really, what this study should say is, the title should be, if your sets are super far from failure, you have to do twice as much work, because that's really what it proved, right? And that's what this chart is proving as well. To get to that top stimulus, if your sets are sloppy and they're not getting you enough stimulus because you keep cutting them short and doing it over and over, you're gonna have to stack multiple sets to get you there, right? Obviously, there's outliers. There's people with genetics that will grow doing almost anything. But assuming you're similar to me, your average genetics, and you really want muscle growth, you want to fully stimulate your muscle and then take those rest days. Don't be in the gym every single day. Don't overrun this fatigue part and not let your body recover and adapt. So instead, train as hard as you can, do as little as you can, as infrequently as you can, and watch your gains improve. Track your progress, right? If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's nothing to be mad about. People shouldn't be commenting all these aggressive comments to me like, "Oh, how dare you say you don't lose muscle after 2 weeks, and you know, you didn't pay attention at all in school," and like, it's like, what are you talking about? No, this applies directly to muscle physiology. So hopefully you guys got something out of this video. This, I believe, is a much better stimulus to fatigue ratio curve, or stimulus curve, as you train throughout an exercise. But hopefully you learned something from this video, which is to train harder and do less. If you can condense the work, why wouldn't you do that? Why is that so offensive? Just because the top bodybuilders aren't doing it? You don't have to do what they do. They're on PEDs. Not only are they on PEDs, they do what the last guy did, right? Everybody's doing what the guy before them did. It's just tradition. It's tradition to do multiple sets, to do 3 sets. Like I said, it's to cover you, right? To think, oh, well, if my first set wasn't good enough, I did a couple more just in case, right? Well, make your first set good enough, and then you don't have to worry about those extra sets. You don't have to train just in case. You can know for certain that you did what was required to stimulate muscle growth. So this is Coach Cam. Hopefully you guys liked the video. Comment, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.